Okay, so this is why this is an invalid move. I only know something if I have satisfied the initial condition, right? That will lead to the consequent. But nothing in that conditional statement prohibits me from getting donuts from other sources, right? It didn't say the only way I'm getting donuts is if I go to the store, right? That would be different. Okay, so we have to look at only what's being given in the argument, right? So these types of structures are really helpful for that. All right, so we can't know that. All right, I'm gonna try the other one, okay? If I go to the store, then I will get donuts. I did not go to the store. So do we know whether or not I have donuts? Exactly, I still might have donuts for the same reason as before, right? Just because I didn't go to the store doesn't necessarily mean I don't have donuts, right? I could have already had them and maybe I was just gonna get more donuts. Yeah, exactly, good. Another example that sort of helps with this relationship is, I don't like to use this one, but it's visually descriptive, and I think it helps us get to the idea that there could be other factors at play. And that is if you did something like, if I eat a ton of French fries, I'll get fat, right? Of course, I could not eat a ton of French fries and still get fat, right? There's still a lot of other things, right? Or again, I could be fat from things other than having eaten French fries, right? So we only know what happens in two situations, but those people are very apt to mistake those. Yeah, good, multiple possibilities, okay? So that's the basics, right? Again, we're just wanting to set up ourselves to be making the best possible arguments. And then when we're assessing other people's arguments, right, the next trick would be like trying to, like I said, take someone else's argument and restructure it in this form, because most people don't argue in this way, right? But we could maybe rebuild someone's argument such that it would fit in these forms. And the idea is that if we could, then that shows that they're giving us a really solid argument, right? But if someone's argument has gaps, right, they haven't provided all the necessary pieces, or the only pieces that they've provided can't be arranged in a way that anything logically follows from that, right, then we're in a problematic situation. So again, these are foundational tools that will help us as a standard to check our reasoning throughout the quarter. All right, so that was lots of knowledge bombs, pausing for questions. Inductive reasoning is also similarly can be successful or not, right? And so we have strong or weak arguments. And inductive reasoning can be sometimes so bad that it borders on what we call the fallacious. So a fallacy is an error in reasoning. And there are tons of them, right? But basically what it means is that whatever support is being given has absolutely no relationship to the conclusion, right? So it's worse than an inductive argument, right? Inductive argument just means that, you know, the support is not making it more likely than not. It's just maybe giving it like less than 50% likelihood. But a fallacy is when there's no relationship at all. So in a slippery slope, right, this is tricky because we often do make predictions that involve a causal relationship, right? We might say, if this happens, right, then something else will follow. A slippery slope is when you go from the initial thing that you're saying is going to start the chain and you jump to the end without showing each part in between, right? So if you actually go through the work and develop a causal relationship, then that's not a slippery slope, right? But the fallacy is when people say like, oh, if you legalize marijuana, then, you know, everyone's going to become crackheads or something like this, right? It's like, you're just putting two things together. You haven't given any reason to suppose that this will lead to this other, right? So it's the lack of support, right? There's just there's no reason, or it's not a good reason, right? Whatever reason has been provided has nothing to do with the truth of the conclusion. Yeah, good. And that's why these are important, right? Because sometimes bad reasoning can mask itself in very convincing ways, right? It pulls at the heartstrings, or it hits that one issue that, you know, really resonates with somebody. So being able to step back and assess it from right, a somewhat more objective view can be useful in that way. Good question. Other questions? can't tell which question is which. So we'll just look at both of them, even though one is from another class. All right, so the reading talks about some rare circumstances where it's okay to use a person's background to change what we think about their argument, but it doesn't list any. When is it fine to do that? Good. So this is an interesting sort of dilemma in philosophy, although I think most contemporary philosophers are happy with taking a pragmatic approach. But the traditional distinction is between what we call analytic philosophy and continental philosophy. Analytic philosophy says that we can assess a philosopher's argument, right? Just their words, just their ideas, and not necessarily, maybe even intentionally avoid taking into account any of their personal details, right? And this is supposed to make the process objective, right? It's supposed to help eliminate bias, right? Well, continental philosophy says that that's really, in fact, irresponsible, right? Because we know that bias is something that everyone has. And so when we pretend like it's possible to just step outside of it, right, that puts us in a really dangerous situation. That leaves us with dangerous ideas that are just under the guise of objective, neutrality, but in fact have like sneaky, sexist, racist views underlying them, right? So the continental approach is saying we should absolutely assess the argument within the context, not only of the person who wrote it, but also the socioeconomic historical context of the time, right? That those things matter.